Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the College of Continuing and Professional Studies webinar, Why AI Fails and How to Fix It. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us. Next slide, please. My name is Shanta Bulai, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. If you have future questions about this webinar or other programs we offer, the college's contact information will be on the last slide of this presentation. I am delighted to introduce the topic for today's webinar, Why AI Fails and How to Fix It. Many professionals use AI tools like ChatGPT the wrong way, wasting time and energy and missing out on their full potential. In this engaging webinar, we want to uncover the biggest mistakes people make with AI and how to fix them. You'll see a live before and after example showing how small changes can transform mediocre AI output into something ready to use. Walk away with a quick and actionable method to get better results instantly and perfect for busy professionals ready to work smarter with AI. In this webinar, you'll identify common pitfalls that lead to poor AI results, recognize how strategic AI can enhance productivity, discuss how to raise awareness and build colleague support, understand how small adjustments can transform AI output quality, and lastly, feel more confident and save time using AI to help brainstorm and ideate. It's a pleasure to introduce the presenter for today's webinar, Valerie Lockhart. Valerie is a digital strategist, educator, and communications expert with over a decade of experience helping a wide range of organizations and entrepreneurs tell their stories online. As a specialist in accessible and audience-focused content, she is passionate about empowering others to communicate with clarity, confidence, and impact. Valerie, thank you so much for joining us, and I will hand it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Shanta. Um, like Shanta said, I'm Valerie Lockhart, and I am going to walk through some things with you today. Hopefully, for most of you, you've already used AI a little bit. So hopefully, this won't be stuff that you've already heard a lot of, but these are really get down to basics of how to be a better prompter for using AI. So, kind of the plan for the day is we'll talk about why AI gets things wrong and when that happens. We'll also kind of level set on how AI learns and kind of big picture, like what's happening underneath the hood, because that will explain to you why AI fails and when it does, because it does. We'll walk through 3 easy fixes, and then we'll talk about why that matters. And next steps, we'll open it up for some questions and what you all want to talk about, which is the most important part to me. So we'll get it started by talking about hallucinations, because that is why AI fails. It's why it's kind of unreliable for us as humans. Because it does hallucinate and it does fail, and it does so very confidently. Recently, I took this clip from a headline that was out. There were some Minnesota attorneys who got caught citing fake cases when they used AI to generate their case law for a case in front of the judge. And when I say that AI hallucinates confidently, it looked correct. It was cited the right way. It looked like it was legitimate case law that they were quoting, but it was fake and it was just made up. And so I thought the judge's quote here was pretty funny. So at this point, I don't trust ChatGPT as far as I can throw it. I think that's funny. We shouldn't just wholesale trust AI because it does hallucinate, and we'll talk about why that happens. But it's not. Well, the thing that I want you all to realize is that's not a fluke. Like, that is because of how AI is built and the way that generative AI works. It's built into the system. So as much as we train models and they can get better and better, there's always a chance that there's going to be wrong information in the answers or the responses that you get from it. And so it's very important to understand how it works, and then to know how to get closer to, good answers, but always know that you have to double check everything. So when I work with students of all ages, I just remind them to not just trust wholesale what comes out of a large language model. So this brings us to kind of how it actually works and what's going on under the hood. So when there's a large language model is trained on a corpus of data, which is when you're talking about ChatGPT and some of the big large language models that we're all using these days, they're trained on everything from the internet to books to white papers to Reddit chats to everything that they can get their spiders to crawl. And so that corpus of information is the training data. And so when you type in a prompt, that prompt gets processed. It goes through a process called tokenization, which gives numeric value to the words that you've typed in. Those numeric values then go and get contrasted against all of the existing data that is in the corpus. And so it looks at it from all different angles, and it figures out what words have been associated with other words or tokens have been associated with the same tokens. It does some vector calculus, and then it updates and it predicts, it gives you the most probable answer based on what it has seen in its training model. And so, when people first prompt for the first time and it comes back with something, it's kind of magical, but it's not actually magic. It is math and code, and there's a process that it goes through. And so I like to remind people that the most important part of AI is the data that it's trained on. And so understanding that if there's a bunch of garbage in the training data, there's more likelihood that you will get a garbage response out. Last but not least, there's this idea called recursion, which is where you take the response that you get and you bring that back into the model as a new prompt. And so that process can be super helpful for giving the large language model more context to what you're asking about or talking about. But if you do that too many times, it can kind of it can start to break down. So it's good. We'll talk through some of the things that you can do to make it not do that as much. But again, you just want to always double check, fact check, click on links that it provides and make sure that they actually go to things that exist, because a lot of times they will just be made up. And so all of the models, no matter what you're using, if it's ChatGPT or it's Claude or it's Gemini, Copilot, whatever the model is, this is what's happening underneath the hood. So the big difference in them is kind of what they've been trained on and what they're focused on. So some of the models will do better at certain things, but they're all doing the same type of process if they're a large language model. The other thing I don't have a slide for, which I should mention, is that a lot of the new models are becoming more multimodal. So that means that instead of just processing words, they can also process images, diagrams. You can upload things for context, and they can generate different outputs than just words. And so there's models like Suno, where you can put in a text prompt and you get music out. There's, Midjourney is one that I use a lot for putting in text and getting images. It's all becoming more and more multimodal as the language models progress. So hopefully you all are having some time to explore those things. The 4 common reasons that AI fails and that it hallucinates is because it doesn't have enough context. So if you put a very vague prompt in, it doesn't really know how to give you back information in a way that that you need it. And so if it doesn't know the context of what you're asking for, it will just give you the most general thing that it has seen in its data. Uh, if you don't tell it those things, it has no idea. So there's no goal. It doesn't know the formatting that it should give you the answer in if you don't tell it what you need. Uh, the guardrails, if there's no guardrails, again, it's giving that context and like giving it the parameters that you're asking it to work within. So if it has no limits, it's looking at all of this data. And so, as I said, there may be a lot of garbage data in the corpus. And so that garbage will filter into your response. And then another huge reason that AI fails is because we as humans don't double check it. So we just accept the first draft and we run with it. And then there's either wrong information in it, or in the case of the lawyers that got in trouble, there's fake information that gets them in a lot of trouble. So from every level of how we're using AI these days, there is more and more risk associated with not double checking the answers that come out. And so these are the four most common causes of why AI fails us. So the number one way that you can fix that is to give the large language model focus. And we can do this with something called using a persona. So in marketing, there's personas, which are kind of this fake customer that has attributes that you understand about your market. And so maybe it's their job, maybe it's their age, their gender, whatever it is, you create a fake person essentially that's your target, right? And so when you're prompting, you can use a persona to give more focus to the large language model. It gives it a person to act as it looks through its corpus of information. And so what that does is it takes it from the whole big corpus of data and it focuses it down to a smaller percentage of the data that relates specifically to what you're asking about. And so one example of this would be you could say you are an expert digital marketing professional. I would like to create a campaign for X, Y, and Z. Please give me 10 different ways that I could market this. And so it puts a filter on the search within the data to limit it and focus it down to only things that have been related to digital marketing and expertise in that area. So it's almost like telling the large language model what role you want it to play as it goes through the data. The second thing that you can do is give it narrative. So as humans, we like stories. We like to hear things in story form. We like to understand why something's happening or what the context is around it. The large language models also work better when we give it that context and we give it that story. So we can tell the large language model we want it to act as a certain person, have that persona that we want it to take. And then we can give it a story around why we're looking for that information or why we're brainstorming for this thing. And it helps with that context piece. And so, you can create urgency if I really need this person to find this information because you can go extreme about it, like is this going to save the world? And so it gives it this context of importance. It also can give in context of like just the situation that you're trying to brainstorm around. One thing that I like to remind people is that generative AI, the large language models, do a better job of giving you information to, like, they're a better brainstorming partner than they are an answer to a question, because of that hallucination factor. Um, you can kind of look at what it gives you and do a gut check and a fact check. You can go see if it's actually real. Talk to someone that's an expert and understand that the answers that it's giving are correct. If you have a business, obviously you are the expert in your business, and so if it makes up something, you're going to know that it's not correct, and you'll be able to fix that. But it gives you a great starting point for brainstorming. And so one way that I use AI a lot is to have it ask me questions about something so that I can kind of steel man my own arguments, or come up with different ways to say things that I want to express. And so that story piece can really help give it some more context and have it do a better job of getting to better results that I want. And then lastly, about that, the third fix that you can do is give the large language model feedback. So when it generates something that's not correct, you correct it. And a lot of times it's funny because you'll say, that's not accurate. Here's what's accurate. And it will pretend like it knew that all along, which is, I think it's funny. But it'll say, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. And it'll go and fix it. So that feedback actually makes the model smarter. And so, there's different, depending on your use cases. If you are doing this for business, you're at work, sometimes there's some proprietary things that you don't want to put into uh, an open, like, large language model like ChatGPT or one of the main ones. But in Microsoft and Google, you have more enclosed systems with Gemini and Copilot. So sometimes your data is training, the feedback that you're giving in those models is training the data that lives within your organization. Whereas on the OpenAI side, you're training their big corpus. And so that's a whole nother thing that we could get into that would take a whole hour. So we won't get into that much, but just understand that correcting it or giving it that feedback, saying, this isn't quite right, this is the correct way, that can help you get better answers, as it remembers things that you're chatting with it about. And so as the models that we're using get better, and by better, I mean they're more trained, they can hold more memory. When ChatGPT first came on the market a few years ago, it could only remember a certain amount of information before it would start hallucinating and just go off the rails and be giving wrong info. Now it's got a much larger window of context that it can remember and hold. And so we're getting better. It's getting less and less hallucination. But again, there's always a chance that it's going to happen. And so you have to prepare for that, and double check everything. So so fixing AI. The way we think about prompting is really more important than the model. So the way you approach it, giving it the persona, giving it some of that narrative, telling it how you want to receive things from it, it takes a little bit of prep work in our minds before you just sit down and ask for something. And so it is a little bit of a mindset shift. There was a study that came out recently. I can't remember where it was from, if it was Google or one of the study came out that they took two groups of people and they had them prompt. One group, they just had them do generic, kind of vague prompts into the system, not really giving more detail or context. And then they took another group and had them kind of do some pre-work to think through what they wanted to say or what they wanted to communicate, and give the large language models like bullet points and thoughts, not in any kind of order, but just random. And then they tested the two groups for like cognitive function. And what's kind of scary is that they found in the group that didn't do that pre-work, they actually showed some cognitive decline. And of course, the clickbait, headlines that went out were like, AI is making us dumb and AI is ruining your brain. There is some truth to that if you don't do some pre-thinking first. And so if you're just offshoring your thoughts and letting the AI do things for you without double checking, and you're just kind of letting it run on its own, it does show that we have cognitive decline in that area. It's kind of the thing that it makes me think of is like nobody remembers phone numbers anymore because it's all in our phone, and we just click on things and we don't really dial numbers anymore. And so it's that same use it or lose it kind of thing, where if you're just not putting any of your own mental effort in, you're going to lose it. And so the thing that I like to tell people to do is do your brainstorming first. You can use the AI to brainstorm, but like when you're looking to create a document or you're looking to create a chart or some kind of other output with your data, it's really helpful to, and for your brain too, to think through it, have your bullet points, think about the points you want to make, who are the people that you're trying to reach, like really thinking through and doing that pre-work before you sit down and start prompting and having it create something. When I do classes on building applications using AI, it's really a matter of creating a process diagram. So what steps do you need to go through? What is your app going to do? What does that process look like? Thinking through that as the human, the user, and then taking that information to the large language model to write some code for this piece of it, or to start breaking it up and making the progress happen, but not just sitting down at ChatGPT and saying, make me an application that does XYZ. It's like, no, here's the process that I want it to go through. Here's what I want the user to do first. Here's the input. Give it those pieces, and then it can start helping you make that happen. So that's a long a long-winded answer to that, but do the thinking first and don't just offshore your thoughts. So for those of you who maybe haven't done prompting using a persona or the narrative, I just wanted to show you really quick kind of a little bit of a difference. This won't be substantial, but just kind of how it goes from a kind of a generic answer to a more custom answer. Or you can change the tone of the answer. So if you just put in explain entrepreneurship. So we'll just have it give us an explanation of what entrepreneurship is. So it goes through and it just gives us kind of some bullet points, generic answer, who an entrepreneur is. This one went a little further, gave us some benefits and challenges, and then the role in the economy. So Gemini, which is what I'm using for this one, gave us a very high level explanation of what entrepreneurship is. So now if I give it a persona, you are a small business owner who is looking to expand into new markets and needs to give stakeholders an understanding of what an entrepreneur needs. So we're giving it just a little more context and what challenges are faced. So we build it out a little bit. Please give this to me in a bullet point list. So we're giving it a persona. We're giving it the narrative around it. We're telling it what it needs, like what the story is. And then we're telling it how we want to receive that information. And so now you'll see that it goes into much more detail, and gives you some bullet points about financial capital, strategic vision, uh, mindset. So you can kind of see how just giving it that little bit of extra detail lets you hone in the information and take it from that very high level to a more detailed approach and detailed response. And now, if I wanted to, I could take and deep dive into some of these bullet points. And so, about talent management, I could ask for a chart that shows that graph or something like that. So it can help you, and it will also make some suggestions, usually, of other things that it can do now that it's given you this information that you're looking for. So again, that's just a really quick show of like how a persona and the story can help get you more detailed information. And then from there, you can dig in and kind of start to build out what you're trying to build with it. So again, when you fix how you're thinking about AI, the AI will work better. So instead of, just being vague and having it do everything in one prompt, like breaking it up into littler pieces, giving it that persona, and then giving it the focus that it needs. So just to recap kind of what we've talked about, I want to open it up for questions and make sure that you all have time. I see there's lots of chats going on. I haven't had a chance to look at them. But that AI isn't thinking, it's really predicting. It's looking at all of that data that it's been trained on, and it's giving you the best outcome that it thinks you want based on what it has seen in its data. Failures really come from having a lack of structure to what you're asking for. So not giving it any context, just asking for a vague thing, not providing the personas. And the way we can really fix that is by giving it focus, framing, and feedback. Let it know, I want it in this format. And if it doesn't do that, tell it that that's not correct and have it rework it. When I've done sessions with students who are using it to write code, it's almost like a pair programming with the AI. So the AI will write some code, the student will go test it, say, oh, it didn't work, I got this error. They bring the error back to the large language model. They say, this is the error code that I got, please help me fix it. It will then use that feedback and get better, update its model, and get better at writing the code that does the certain thing that they're looking for. So this focus, framing, and feedback loop can really help you get to the next step in your process. So with that, I want to open it up to have a discussion. To my mind, those are the more fun conversations to have. And then I'm happy to answer any specific questions, or if there's something that wasn't clear in what I just talked about, please let me know. So Shanta, do you want to handle that?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Valerie, and thank you for providing your insights
Yeah.
on AI and all of the nuances of it. That's always really appreciated for sure. So yes, we're going to go into the Q&A portion, but right before we do that, we do have a quick survey that we would hope to get some feedback on how our webinar content is. Is it relevant to what you're looking for? And then also the QR code that is posted there here is going to go a little bit further in depth. So if you have any suggestions for future webinar productions, feel free to share on that. So I'll just give you like a minute to fill a survey out. And also, again, feel free to use the link or the QR code if you want to add a little bit more detail in that. And then we will move right in to the Q&A portion. And as Valerie mentioned, we have quite a lot of questions here. So if I don't get to your question, or if it is more specific, perhaps to your role or organization, feel free to send an email to ccapsinfo@umn.edu, and we will pass that on over to Valerie, who also teaches here as an instructor. So she can go further into that as well.
I do like to geek out on like specifics. So I'm happy to answer questions
I
specifically
love
for
that.
people. Yeah.
All right, so our first question here. So who or what is the best resource for beginner learning about AI?
It depends on what you want to do with it, but I would say there are like it depends on what context. So if you're wanting to learn more about prompting, I would say, like your personal use of it. I would say classes like we offer at the U, like there's some introductory basics that we go through. If you're looking at it more from like training your own kind of model, or using, there's some Google has some good resources out there on using it that way. There's some open source models that are out there like Llama, um, that you can kind of create your own AI. So it depends on how deep down the rabbit hole you want to go. Anywhere from just a regular user to like creating your own AI. There's lots of different resources. So like I said, there's some classes that we offer. There's other things. If you go on YouTube, there's a ton of great videos out there that can help you get started, depending on what your use case is.
Yes. So our next question is, so thank you for showing how it works in the background. Is there a way to know what your AI platform was trained on? For example, to see if ChatGPT was training on Reddit versus something, or maybe another AI program not using Reddit.
I wish there was, but unfortunately, we don't know. Um, they're all kind of a black box at this point where we're moving into a time where that is the intellectual property. So the data that they train on, the models, the way that they have their algorithms built, those are not really publicly shared. That's like their secret sauce that they keep behind the curtain so that we can't really understand it, because those are their trade secrets, right? And so this is why we have ChatGPT versus Gemini versus they're all doing these different things and they're trying these different ways of creating it. And so they don't want to share that because then somebody would just steal it. So we don't really know. I can say through testing and things that we, have seen in the research, there are models that are better at certain things. But that really just comes down to testing and like research. So what I always tell students is find the model that you like to work with, the one you get the best results from, test a couple of different ones out, see how they handle things differently, and then find the workflow that works for you. So it might not be the same for everybody. But if you feel more comfortable with one versus another, or you feel like they're giving you better results, go with that. Because we don't really know what data's in there. Um, there's some lawsuits that have been happening related to what data has been trained on in the certain models. And I think we're just going to see more of that as we go because the way that they have been training may be considered unethical in certain circumstances. And so people are now kind of suing the models for how they have gathered information. So it's all shifting and changing. We're kind of in the Wild West right now.
That is a great way to put it. I feel like it definitely is the
Yeah.
Wild West. I love it. So yeah, our next question is, so the University of Minnesota students have access to Gemini or U of M specific instance of Gemini. My understanding is that information provided to Gemini is more protected in terms of training the model and leaking. Will you please discuss that a little more in detail if you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I say this um, the user agreements that are signed when an organization signs up for either Google or Microsoft, like whatever house you're in, um, there's an agreement that is signed as an organization that they will not use that data within the platform to train. It will be more protected for your organization. When you're using something like ChatGPT or Claude or one of the other like Perplexity, some of the open models that aren't within an organization, those you're kind of signing that you're gonna be open to training the model. And so when you're using your school account or you're using your professional account, there is an agreement that they are not letting that information outside of your organization. So it's still training the model, but the model is much smaller and it's based on your data within your organization. And so it's not going out to the internet and pulling things. It's really like looking at everything on the drive or everything within your space and making adjustments based on that. So as much as I trust end user agreements, that's what we have to live by. And so that's what the understanding is that they are not, they kind of create a walled garden of your information to train on.
Great, thank you. And our next question, one thing that has never been clear to me, how long will it keep the chat itself in context? I've had a few long continuing conversations about popular topics, but it seems to lose context of answers it previously gave. Would it be better off starting a new chat with the previous answer I want to build off of?
Yeah. So, like I said, when it first came out, it was like a paragraph, like it could only remember this much. Now we're up to probably um, a book's worth of information that it can hold in its memory. But the further away you get from the beginning of the chat, it will lose some of that context from earlier because it can only hold so much, and so it will drop off as you keep going. So one way that I have seen people do that to keep going with a conversation is they will have at one point in the discussion they will have the large language model summarize what the discussion has been, and they will create a document from that, and then they will take that document to a new chat and upload it either as context or copy and paste that summary as the context in the new window and then continue the discussion or the research. And so you kind of have to transport information. Now with some of them, some of the models, they have huge like that's really where the space is expanding is in the memory and the context windows. And so some of them are getting really good at like knowing all of your chats and like they will be able to pull information from a bunch of your different chats and projects and things. And so to be safe, it's better. The other thing you can do is create a project. So we didn't really get into this, but uh, in ChatGPT, they have projects that you can create where you can give it a bunch of PDFs or images or like extra context and have conversations within that project. And those tend to have larger context windows. So hopefully that helps and kind of answers the question. But summarize and then bring it to a new chat is a good practice.
Yeah, thank you. So next one is, as people who are trained coders utilize AI models like Codex that can build out fully functional graphic user interface apps. Would
Yep.
you have any specific recommendations for those individuals to better work with what they may requesting to have developed underneath the hood by the AI agents?
Yeah, so I kind of mentioned this when we were talking through it, but if you have an idea for an application or a website or whatever you want, the GUI that you want to build with AI, um, you can kind of process diagram it out. So um, wireframes are great to create first, and then have it, you want to deconstruct the whole thing into pieces so that you can have the AI work and write code for the pieces and then kind of bring it together all together at the end. So deconstruct the whole thing into smaller chunks, use the AI to work through each chunk of the application or the site, and then kind of bring it all together in Symphony, and test, make sure it all works together at the end. So that's how I handle like using it for code. If you try to create a, something that does all like 10 different things and you just have it code it at once, it probably will hallucinate more because it's trying to do too much. So breaking it down into smaller digestible pieces and then working with it that way is helpful.
Wonderful. Thank you, Valerie.
Mhm.
So the next one is, what are your thoughts on the potential equity issues with AI use in schoolwork? For example, do students who can afford a membership for AI get much better responses than those who use the free version? My understanding is that the paid AI versions are trained better.
So the paid versions are able to take and get more context, which, as we've been discussing through this whole thing, makes them more reliable. So yes, I would say this is the gap that we're going to see. There's always been a digital divide. And I think with AI, that divide is just growing. And so this is why, open source, it's why having access is so important. Why schools need to, if they're going to allow AI use, they need to invest in models uh, that do allow all students to have the same type of access. And so I don't know all the answers, but the problem is real. There is a divide, and students that are able to go home and get on a paid version of ChatGPT are going to have an advantage over students that are using a free version at school. So it's something that, as things are progressing and as we're changing, like those are maybe scholarship opportunities, or I don't know if, some of the large language models might start donating pro accounts to schools, or like I said, don't really know what the answer is, but the need is real. And it is an ethical situation that we're going to have to deal with because, there are still kids that don't even have internet at home. So we're only expanding and deepening that gap as we rely more and more on these tools.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So next question. When building the persona, your example, you're making the AI agent the persona, would it be helpful to build it as an I statement?
So I'm thinking like, say I am doing XYZ or I need this. You certainly can. Uh, what that what that doesn't do is give the model the focus role. Like it's when it's an I statement, it's more of the story. So like the story is I need to do these things and I need this and that, or I am in this place and I need to do XYZ, which will absolutely work. It's almost like taking the hat off of you and putting the hat on the large language model to wear that. And so like it's directing its focus on how it should look at the data, not some external thing. like not this, this thing outside of itself, but having it look at it from a different perspective. And hopefully that makes sense, but it's not too philosophical, but you want it to have the filter on its eyes and not from your perspective.
Yeah, yeah. This actually goes nicely into the next question that I also have. Um, I read that some AI, I read for some AI use please is unnecessary in prompts and consumes unnecessary resources.
Yeah.
Is there truth to that? I feel like I use it because I'm like, I just want to make sure that you know I appreciate what you're doing as
Right.
AI.
So this is a line that we have to walk because we either have to be nice to our technology overlords, and like if they ever do become sentient, maybe they will know that we were nice to them and they'll spare us or something. But it is true that saying please and thank you, if that's the only thing in your prompt, it is a waste of energy and a waste of tokens and a waste of the electricity and the water and the things that get used every time we prompt something in a large language model. And so I think it was Sam Altman that came out from OpenAI and said, stop telling it please and thank you. If that's the only thing in your prompt, it's a waste. That doesn't mean that you can't build it into a prompt where you're asking for something or you're giving it more clarity or just don't have it be a one-off prompt of thank you. It's just unnecessary. But that said, the concept, like every single word that we type in there has a cost to it. And it could either be like I said, electric that is used or water that's used to cool the system. Like huge data centers are running these things. And so every little bit, you know, costs something. So just make sure that every word that you're prompting has value for you because it's costing somewhere something. So
I like that to think about the resources that's being used.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So our next one is there a way to think through when I should use our work's Microsoft Copilot versus ChatGPT? The only difference I know is what you explained, that Copilot is internal model and ChatGPT is open to the world. Is there anything they're different in the models themselves?
They obviously they have different algorithms that they run. There's different training data that's within them, but for the most part, no. I would say the biggest difference is just that ChatGPT doesn't have the guardrails on it to keep your information from other people, or from the training data itself. And so if it's something that your company, if it's an internal document that nobody in the public should see, it probably should never go into Chat GPT. If it's something that, if it's something like that, then you would want to keep that in your closed system. Otherwise, if it's anonymized and it's, something general that the public knows or can see, you can try both and see which one gives you a better result. Um, a lot of my time is spent testing different models in different ways to see, like, well, if maybe I like the output from this one better than this one. And so it's really just a matter of working with them to figure out what you like better, if it's not proprietary.
Great, thank you. And let's see. There are so many questions, so I just want to say thank you for all of the questions. I'm trying to go through them, filter through. And again, like I mentioned earlier, if I don't get to them, feel free to send those to ccapsinfo@umn.edu. But our next question is, can you provide an example of how best to force it to cite or give links to the evidence or research it's drawing from? I find it frustrating when it provides uncited evidence because it's harder to know if it's a hallucination.
Yeah, so you can build that into your prompt. So when we talked about the focus, framing, and feedback, it's part of that process. So when you're prompting, ask it to cite its sources. So give me a bullet point list of these details and cite your sources. I will tell you, it will still hallucinate. It will still make some of them up. So you will have to go through and check each source to make sure that it's legit. A lot of times it will look correct, just like in the lawyer case. It's all cited correctly and looks right. But if you click on it, it goes nowhere. And so you will have to recheck them. I will say, kind of across the board, through all of the testing that's been done, Perplexity is one of the best models that has been found for citing its sources. It gives the most accurate citations, and it's built that way. And so a lot of people, when they need to cite things and they need it to be more accurate, will use Perplexity AI versus like a ChatGPT or another one. So, but yeah, any of them, if you ask it to cite its sources, it should be able to give you a list. And then it's just the due diligence of checking to make sure that they're actually legit.
Great, thank you. Our next question then is, are there any great frameworks, templates, or other examples for developing a policy around AI use?
Yeah, so there are, I can't think of the name of the organizations off the top of my head, but there are some organizations that are collecting that data from companies and from school districts and from state governments, and kind of creating a repository of policies around AI use. And I can do some digging to find the answer, the names of those places, but they do exist. And so um, they're creating kind of a best practices around policy making. Um, and it really depends on your business and like what your use cases are. So if you're, a very heavy development house where you're doing a lot of coding, like your people doing coding are already using it. Whereas some of the other businesses, like they're just starting to get into that. And so if you have good relationships with other companies that have implemented policies, you can ask, you know, if you're part of a chamber of commerce or something like that, can be a shared resource that you can tap into, and they might be able to help you find that information. But there are places that are starting to collect best practices for policy making and sharing those templates and ways that you can protect your company from um, litigation and other problems that come from using wrong data. So,
Yeah. Okay. So we are getting closer to time here. I'm just going to do a few more questions,
okay.
and then I will wrap it up for today. I did post in the chat. Valerie does teach one of our AI for productivity courses here, where she will go further in, and you can even ask questions to her directly. So I'm sure some of these questions are very multi-steps, right? So
Yep.
we can definitely do that. So the next question is, our office has a chat bot, and we notice how much our users struggle to write good prompts. Do you have any suggestions for providing prompt engineering support from the bot, users of the bot, or any suggestions on how to increase user competency?
Yeah. So one thing that I have seen people do is, when you go to fill out a chat, like a chat box, there will be some like shadow typing in there that's like a little suggestion. I've had people pre-fill that out with a suggestion of ask your question in this way, or like kind of giving them a suggested how to frame their question. The other thing I've seen people do is have a button that you can click that pops up a little, like almost like a tutorial within the chatbot itself with um, suggested questions, or like an FAQ. You can have that at the top. And so as your chatbot is getting questions, it can update the FAQ to be the most frequently asked questions. And so it might eliminate the need for somebody to type something in if they can just click on it up above and like maybe it's like the top 10 questions are always getting updated as people search for things. So there's a few different ways that I've seen people manage that. And there are tools out there that allow businesses to build those, the chatbot itself and the updated frequently asked questions pretty simply. So it's not a big lift technically to get those things in place. But yeah, giving suggested, like, phrase it this way or ask for it this way, that can be really helpful. And then the auto generated, so they just have to click and get their questions answered.
Wonderful. So we will go with one more question here. I feel like it's a very spicy, could be spicy
Ooh,
question.
I like spicy.
Yeah, but great, but definitely information that's vital, I would say. So, can you touch on any AI failures due to bias in training data? The training data is heavily weighted towards internet data, mainly consisting of Western education industry, industrialized, rich, developed countries.
Yep.
These data contain specific cultural, social, and gender and racial biases.
100%. Um, until we can figure out how to remove bias from people, there is going to be bias in AI because it is built out of us. It is built out of the things that we create. And so, to my mind, what is so important is that we make sure that everybody is contributing, everybody is adding to the models. People are training their own models. So there's some really cool work happening right now around accessibility in AI. So people with disabilities creating their own models for things, people of different languages creating and making sure that they're contributing. This is also why keeping a human in the loop is so important. So, you can have AI translate something, but if you're not a speaker of that language, there's a good chance that you are going to get something wrong. And so going to the people that speak that language, going to the people that have that lived experience and making sure that they are validating and they are still in the conversation and in that process is hugely important. And so I think it's we have to get everybody included and we have to be all contributing because that's the only way that voices are going to be not left out because they are left out right now because that's what it's trained on. So we have to change what we're training, like what the data is that we're training on.
Wonderful. Thank you, Valerie. Wonderful
Yeah.
insight on that topic as well. So now I'm just gonna wrap it up here quickly. So thanks again for everyone joining us today. If you can go to the next slide for me, Valerie.
Yes.
Wonderful. So CCAPS now offers flexible workforce development solutions designed to equip employees with targeted knowledge and skills your organization needs. Our program includes industry-driven bachelor's and master's programs, along with over 15 non-credit certificates with over 90 individual courses. One of those courses including the AI for productivity. So if you're interested in that, definitely feel free to take a look at that. And there is a QR code there to reach out to our business development manager, Beth Laurie, if you are interested. And our final slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, we will send a link to the webinar recording within a week of today's webinar. The recording will be also posted to our CCAPS webinar archive as well as our CCAPS YouTube page. And the University of Minnesota employees are eligible for well-being points by listening to our webinar. So please use that link there. It's also provided in the chat if you'd like to take advantage of that. And the college's contact information is also there if you're interested in our programs. Other than that, you guys all have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. And Valerie, thanks again for presenting today.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's fun. And please reach out with your questions because like I said, I like to dig in deep. So
Yes.
thank you.
We had 87 questions, so there's quite a lot out there.
We'll try to get to them all.
Yeah. Take care, everyone.